Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next episode of the Unbreakable Her podcast, where we make space for the stories of resilient women. Today, we are having a conversation about infertility and pregnancy loss. So, trigger warning if that topic is not healthy for you to engage with today, please do not. There will be plenty of other episodes that you'll be able to listen to free of the trigger. I want everybody to be healthy emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically. So if this topic doesn't allow you to engage and stay healthy, then please do not. Um, Again, you will be able to engage. You can come back to it later or not at all, and that will be totally fine. So let's get into our topic. Infertility and pregnancy loss are far more common than most of us realize. According to the National Institutes of Health, about 15 to 20% of clinically recognized pregnancies in the US end in miscarriage. For some women, that grief repeats. According to research published by the National Library of Medicine, recurrent pregnancy loss, defined as two or more miscarriages, affects about 1 to 5% of women of reproductive age. And while doctors continue to search for causes, NYU Langone Health reports that nearly half to three-quarters of these losses have no identifiable reason. Behind every one of those statistics is a story, is a journey of waiting, of heartbreak, of restoration. And here to share her story, her strength, and her triumph, we welcome this week's guest, Joniqua Combs.
So I have known, full disclosure, I've known Joniqua for most of my life. I want to say maybe like
Yeah,
most of it.
pretty much.
Yeah, yeah. And so I was younger but aware of some of the things that she experienced. Specifically, we're going to talk about her infertility and fertility journey. And I think the things that I have known, this is not something you just walk up to somebody and be like, "So I'm curious." Right? Like that's not how you do it. So the things that I have known, it has been a lot to handle. So I want to hear about it in your own words. And I think sometimes when we think about fertility journeys, now we think about it from a technology standpoint. We think about like, oh, and the medical breakthroughs, and you could just do it this way. But I always think about it biblically. I think about what happened with Abraham and Sarah, and I think about the other times in scripture where God, he comes through because he promised. And so thank God for the medical breakthroughs. Every good and perfect gift comes from him. Also, God in real time, right now, contemporarily, still keeps his promises and works miracles.
Yeah.
And so that's the place that I kind of want to come from. So I'm going to do a lot less talking from this point forward. I think I'll guide our conversation, but I really want people to hear your story in your own words. So let's start from the beginning, really. Before you started your journey into motherhood, what images did you have about what motherhood would look like for you? And what were you thinking about motherhood?
Well, I'll have to start it like close to the beginning stages of my life. When I was a young child in elementary school, they used to give us these sheets, these questionnaires, if you will, asking us what we thought about life, how our outlook on life was. And surprisingly, I still have a paper that's framed from, I think it was kindergarten, on what I wanted to be. And surprisingly enough, I chose that I wanted to be a housewife and a mother. So,
Wow.
yes. Now, of course, as I got up in age, that changed and I wanted to go off and do my own thing. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I always wanted to be a mother, not necessarily with a large family, but I knew that I wanted to have children. And I thought that, the church teaches us you get married and then you have a family and you work in the church. So once I received the Lord as my personal savior, that's what I knew was going to happen. because that's what I wanted in life. That's what the church taught. But a few years down the road after marriage, that's when we discovered that it wasn't going to be so easy for us.
Thank you. That actually takes me right to my next question, which is, can you take us to that moment when you realize the journey is going to look different than you expected?
Yes. My husband and I, when we first got married, we just wanted to enjoy life. We weren't trying to have children right away. Um, but then when we said, okay, we've been in this thing for a couple of years, so now let's just start trying. We found it difficult. As a matter of fact, we were married for 11 years before I conceived naturally. 11 long years. Now now,
Wow.
mind you, we were
I didn't know that.
trying at every chance. We were
As the
trying.
married folks are wont to do. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yes, but for 11 years, and I conceived naturally. However, after about a few months, we lost that child, and it was heartbreaking. It was devastating
Hmm.
because we waited, Lord. We were promised. We did things right. And I felt like for a moment, I felt like I was less than a woman because
Hmm.
I couldn't do what I thought was supposed to come naturally. But at no time did I question God and ask him why. I just knew that, okay, it's going to happen eventually. It's going to happen eventually. But I wondered when it was going to
Hmm.
happen. But
Hmm.
actually, God did come through for us, but it took the assistance of one of the foremost infertility specialists in the country
Hmm.
to help us along the way. But there were um, financial struggle.
Hmm.
At that time, insurance wasn't covering infertility or the fertility journey.
Hmm.
So we had to pay out of pocket. And let me tell you, it wasn't a little bit of money, but for 2001 is when I gave birth to our first son. And we tried, up to then, I was pregnant. Let's see, I got to count now. One,
Okay.
two, three, four. I was pregnant 4 additional times between 2001 and 2004. I was pregnant 4 times and miscarried every one.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you get to year 11, and in year 11, you have your first pregnancy. Is that included in that four number?
No,
So that was the first
that was,
pregnancy. And then after that, four more.
yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
We were
Okay.
busy.
So, well, okay. So this is between 2001 and 2004. So
Mhm.
what I want to try and capture here is what was happening with you internally and like emotionally and mentally
Mhm.
when you have a pregnancy and the pregnancy doesn't it doesn't it's not a successful pregnancy. Well, it is a successful pregnancy. It didn't make it to birth. So these were all five of these pregnancies were miscarriages.
For my in 2001, I gave birth to our son. I gave birth
Okay.
to him.
So four miscarriages and one child who was born
Yes.
and who didn't survive.
Yes. As a matter of fact, I had gone to the doctor the day before I went into labor and said, something's not right. She sent me home and said, everything is okay. The next day, my mother said, you are in labor. That was at 5 months. And he was born a few days before my husband's and my wedding anniversary. Our
My
wedding
gosh.
anniversary is September 24th. He was born on September 1st. And I went through it with no medicine, nothing, natural childbirth. And the doctor at that time, not the specialist, it was a different doctor. She said to me, your baby is going to be born. And at that time, we knew that it was a boy. He is not going to survive. And at that moment, I'm laying in the hospital bed, my husband on one side, my mother on another, crying. And I began instantly to pray. This was the time when I believed that my faith was tested like it had never been tested before. I began to pray and I spoke these words: "The Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." After I gave birth to my son, I held him for a little while, and then I had to be rushed to emergency surgery because I was hemorrhaging. So when I got back to the room, here I was, a woman who left the room with a baby, returning with no baby. Again, I never questioned God. I never asked him why, but I knew that God was going to eventually answer my prayer. I returned home, uh, having to plan the funeral services for the baby that I was carrying. And again, I am now comforting everyone around me, telling them that God is still faithful. He's going to answer prayer. This is from my mother, who was saved for, at that point, probably about 30 some, 40 some years. She said, "I keep asking God why." And I said, "I don't." And of course, I was sorrowful because I had to bury my son, but I still had confidence that God would answer prayer. Mother's Day after Mother's Day, I'm looking at mothers with their children and I'm rejoicing for them. And I'm still internally saying, "God, when will my time be? Maybe next year." Pregnancy after pregnancy, I'm saying, "God, okay, I lost this one, but I know that you're still faithful. And maybe this time next year." Going on and on. And finally, my husband said, going through the journey of infertility is not an easy one, from having to go and get blood work done, going into the office, seeing pregnant women, going to church. So many of my friends in the church and I were pregnant around the same time, seeing them give birth to their children. And here I am, rejoicing with them, still wondering when my time would be. I did not struggle with faith in knowing that God would answer prayer, but I just struggled with his time frame. And sometimes we can have a whole lot of faith, but
Mhm.
God, when are you going to do what you promised me you were going to do? And that was most of my struggle, dealing with the time frame of God.
Okay. Wow. So as you're talking, the thing that is standing out to me is you never questioned God.
No.
Did you ever think like maybe he meant we'll adopt? Or like I think about in scripture about how Sarah remixed the promise,
Yeah.
right?
I was there in a way.
Mhm,
I still had faith in God that he would do what he promised he was going to do.
mhm.
It was taking a long time. So my husband and I had looked into fostering and also looked into adoption. And I said, okay, we had actually started the process of becoming foster parents, because I was like, okay, I know God said that I'm going to give birth to my own children, to our children, but we're just going to speed this process along because we want to be parents so badly.
Mhm. Okay. So that really uh adds some layers to the whole experience because I think when we receive a promise from God and I'm not naive to the fact that not everybody fully understands or has experience with hearing from God,
Mhm.
God speaking to you when you're certain it's God. Not everybody fully has that context. And so I think it's really important that you bring that to light that God said it and I was certain about that. I was sure that I heard from him. Also, it speaks to how difficult it can be to walk through the season between his promise and the fulfillment of promise, not because of a lack of faith of what God can do or that he will do, but as you said, because of how long it is taking or what that timing is in general. It could be years, it could be weeks, but it's beyond what we expected
Right.
in terms of how long it would take. And so I think that's a really important distinction to make, that you didn't waver in terms of what God
Mm.
could do or would do. It was like, could you
All right,
give
God,
me
can you
just,
hurry up?
would you mind putting it on the calendar?
Exactly, exactly. As I said earlier, I was encouraging people around me. My mother, who was one of the most holy women I knew, she even had her doubts. Let me just say this: questioning God or asking him why is not a sin. He wants us to come to him. He
Yeah.
already knows
Yeah.
we're thinking it. He knows how we feel. So we might
Hmm.
as well ask him. My mother, for years, she said, I asked God why. I said, well, Lord, did you really? I thought I heard you. Did I hear it wrong? But I always knew. Oh, mommy, you heard it right. We heard it right. And he's going to do it.
Where did that faith come from for you? Do you think that you're a person who has the gift of faith? And when did you start to, like, when in your life do you remember being like, oh, I trust God. He said it. I'm good. I don't see it. That's fine. He said it.
I believe that's a very good question. I believed it was formed in me. Yes, I have the gift of faith. And I believe that it was also uh, the faith of my father and what I saw from my father helped strengthen, increase. And it's almost as if, even at an early age, that my faith morphed into something mode that sometimes I don't even recognize. And I say that because as a child, I recognized that I saw things and I viewed life and even life's challenges differently than those around me. And I
Mhm.
believe that it is because of the structure and the guiding hand of my father that it helped me at that time, and it has developed into what it is today. Because I'm the type of person who believes if I know that God said something, I can have a million people telling me something else. But no, I know I heard from God, and it doesn't matter what you say. I know that God's going to do what he said. And because of my faith, and I know that everyone doesn't have the same measure of faith, because of my faith, even when it's at its lowest, I still trust that there's someone there to hold me up when I feel like I just can't go.
Mhm.
He's there.
Right. Also, sometimes God ministers to us. He uses people to help us navigate the spaces that we're in, especially hard spaces. So, can you talk about who in your life during this time you turned to, where you were able to maybe offload some of it or lean as you were going through these miscarriages, and then to give birth and lose your son? Who did you lean on the most during that time?
During that time, it's mostly my mother and my husband. I birthed something in my husband. He was a musician, but he started writing more. And he wrote one song in particular. He promised never to leave me, never to
Mhm.
leave me alone, never alone. And I found myself singing that song often. But
Mhm.
my mother was a huge part in one that I leaned on because she was a praying woman. And I knew that if mommy, because that's what I called her, that
Mhm.
mommy spoke it, I could rest in her words because I knew that she heard from God.
Mhm.
So my husband and my mother, and also my sister Carmen. I will never forget the day, and excuse me if I tear up. I will never forget the day that I came home after giving birth to my son, and my sister came into my bedroom. I was crying, and she sat beside me, and the sun was shining through the window, and she said, "If you can't carry a child, I will have a child for you." She said, "I will
Wow.
carry a child for you." And when she said that, I really bawled. But they were the ones who really, besides the Lord, of course, they were the ones who really helped me get through it.
It's really a moment of light to see and to hear. You talk about my family was here, my husband, my mother, my sister. That was my community that I leaned on the most.
Yes. They knew from the the appointments, they knew everything. It was laid
Mhm.
out on the table. I had friends who knew some, but they did not know down to the details because
Right.
when you're going through an infertility journey, you've got schedules that you have to go by, tests that you have to take, and they were the ones who knew it all. So
Mhm.
that's why I was able to lean on them the most.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it also speaks to the fact that there are some things you just have to keep in house because
Yes,
when you say a lot, it leaves room for opinions.
yes,
And I would imagine, and this is just me guessing, but I would imagine that one of the things that helped you maintain your level of faith is that you didn't have too many voices telling you not to trust or to,
yes,
you know.
yes.
So let's I want to bring us back to the story, like the timeline of the story. So we have four miscarriages and you give birth to your son who passes away. And then you plan a funeral service for your baby. Can you talk about what that was like to walk through having to do that?
It was hard. First of all, having walked with and supporting my mother through the death of my father, but I didn't have to plan that.
Mhm.
But having to actually decide who's going to pick up the remains of your baby before you leave the hospital. I don't know. There was only one funeral home that I knew of who had buried my father 2 years before. So because they were friends of the family, I made the call, and Mrs. Young, I'll never forget her, said, "Don't worry about it. We have it at your convenience." So at that time, we were living with my mother, and I remember saying, "How are we gonna pay for this financially? We've gotta have a cemetery, we've gotta have all of this. What do we do?" And my dear cousin, who was like a second mother to me, Laverne, walked in. Now, I hadn't voiced this with anyone.
Mhm.
She walked into the house to come and see me, as family does, and handed me an envelope. And in that envelope was everything we needed for the services, the graveside services, and the burial and everything for our son. And then, of course, we had to go to the funeral home to make sure that everything was as we liked. But
Mhm.
Mrs. Young took the utmost care. She took care of our son, gave him the very best, and even said, "We're going to make sure that you have the full services for your son." Put his small casket in that beautiful white hearse,
Wow.
drove him to the cemetery. And when we got there and I looked, Sorry if I cry. Our family, my cousins, my niece, my nephews, family, my mother-in-law, father-in-law, my brothers-in-law, everyone there to support us. And it was at that time, I mean, I already knew, but if I
Mhm.
had any doubts that I did not have the supportive family, they were all dispelled that day.
Mhm.
It was just beautiful.
Yeah. Community is really powerful. And I'm really happy that you had people to show up for you because there are so many people who go through journeys like this and they do it basically alone.
Yes.
So I'm really glad that you had your family. So we get to so this is in 2004 when you gave birth. Okay.
2001 and 2004 leading up to that, that were the 4 miscarriages.
Miscarriages.
It was in 2004 that, we were in, a service, and my husband and I, we were having difficult times then, and he was on the organ, and my mother looked over to him and said, "Vaughn, the Lord said he's gonna bless you, pressed down, shaken together, and running over." And I stood up in church, and you know how I am, and I said,
Mhm.
"I believe."
Mhm.
He said, "I wasn't even talking to you. I was talking to him." Okay? Fast forward about a month later, I wasn't feeling the best. Now, by this time, let me just back up a little. By this time, my husband said, "I can no longer watch you go through
Mhm.
this. We're going to stop. We're going to take a break." And I'm crying because I'm like, I don't want to.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to give you a child." And he said, "No,
Yeah.
it's too much." So we had stopped. So
Mhm.
about in the month of November, I wasn't feeling well and I called out from work that day. And I'm laying down and we say something, but I know it was the spirit of the Lord.
Mhm.
Said, "Go and buy a pregnancy test." And in my mind, I reasoned and I said, "I don't know why, because I know I'm not pregnant." So I go to this drugstore. At the time, it was called Drug Fair. And I go and get a pregnancy test. And about $20. That was probably my last $20. And I get to the register. I'm standing maybe about a few people behind from the register. And I smell the chocolate coming out of the the wrapper of the chocolate bar. It was a Hershey's candy bar. And I could smell the chocolate and I said, no way. Now I know that when a woman is pregnant, her senses are heightened. I literally could smell the
Mhm.
chocolate, but I said, "Mm-mm, there's no way. I can't be." So I go up to the register, pay for my pregnancy test. I get home and I take the test. I can't remember how many minutes I was supposed to wait. Honey, it wasn't even half of that time. That line started showing up, and I said, "I know this ain't right." I started crying and I called my husband and I said, "Honey, I'm pregnant." He said, "No, you're not." I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "How do you know?" I said, "Because I took a test." Immediately, I called the doctor's office and I said, "I just took a pregnancy test and I'm pregnant." She said, "Come in immediately because I'm going to have to run your blood work. It's about 5 minutes away." I walked in. There's a waiting room filled with wives and husbands. And I walked in and she said, "You need to go on back." I walked through the door, went, got my blood work. She said, "I'm going to run it. And by the time you get home, I'll have the results." She said, "Congratulations. You're pregnant." Lord, if we didn't start rejoicing. My mama, I called my mother. My mother's rejoicing. My husband's rejoicing. He's still singing, "I can't believe it." The nurse at the doctor's office is crying and rejoicing. This was in 2004. My mother went with me to every single one of my doctor's appointments. She said, "Dr. Russell, The nurse said, Dr. Russell's not going to believe this. You're going to have to come back in. Now, this is one of the foremost infertility specialists in the country. We get into that ultrasound room. I'm set up. He comes in. He says, I hear you're pregnant. I said, yeah, that's what the blood test shows. He gives me the ultrasound and speaks these words. It's a miracle. 2001, naturally, up to 2004, every pregnancy I had was with the assistance of the infertility specialist. You name it, all except IVF. That was the next step.
Okay. Okay.
IUI, which is uterine insemination. That, nothing, the fertility drugs so that I would ovulate as I was supposed to, all of that. None of those things that were scientific breakthroughs at that time worked. But it was God who said, after my husband said no more, who said,
Mhm.
now I'm going to show you better than I can tell you.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that pregnancy in 2004 now, mind you, I had to go to the doctor a few times a week to make sure that everything was okay. But in
Mhm.
June 2005, mm, after 23 hours of labor, because he refused to come, laying flat on my back, Lord have mercy, God blessed me to give birth to our son, Jules.
And so I know Jules's birthday because it's the same as my niece
Yes,
Amani's birthday.
yes,
And when she was little, she used to say, when she learned how to say her birthday, she used to say June 17. So that's how I always refer to her
yes,
birthday. So Jules was born on June 17
yes,
in 2005.
yes,
Wow.
yes,
Wow.
yes, yes. After 23 hours, now listen, he wasn't going,
That's
he was determined not to
who.
come. I
And
mean, induced labor. The doctor was like, well, um, your baby's not going to come. We can send you home or we can do a C-section. I looked at him. I said, I'm not going home. You're going to do what
mhm,
you need to do. Now,
mhm,
mind you, he said, well, let me get some rest and we're going to schedule you for a C-section. And
mhm.
listen, that was the best cry I have ever heard.
So you went from miscarrying and then giving birth to your first son early, very early, too early for viability, to Jules just being like, I'm very comfortable. I don't want
Yeah.
to come out there.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Which is that's wild. Wow. Okay. When you got to like the 5 months mark with Jules, like what was happening for you mentally? Did you have any anxiety at that point? Like first
Girl,
baby didn't make
yes.
it past this point.
Yes. Yes. I listen. Anxiety on 100 because mind you, now I'm having to see the infertility specialist once a week, going to get blood work drawn every week, giving myself injections so that the pregnancy would continue to be viable every day, taking medication every day, going to my obstetrician gynecologist once a week to also have injections, get blood work, and going to maternal fetal medicine every month to make
Mhm,
sure that everything they could do to make sure that this baby was going to come, they did. Going to Christiana every month. Uh,
man.
it was something, and let me just tell you that it was so bad that when I would go to get blood work, um, if I had a different tech, they would look at me and question the marks on my arm, And I would have to say,
Oh,
"Listen, I." Yeah,
mhm.
it was that serious. And I had to tell them, "Listen, this is what I have to do every week," so that they would understand, they would understand. But yeah, it was.
They thought you had track marks.
Yeah,
They thought you were like a drug user.
they
Wow.
did, they
That's
did,
how
they
that I
did.
mean, even for that to enter someone's mind, you were being stuck a
Yes,
lot.
a lot.
So even once you get to this place where, like, the baby is he's healthy because you're getting your scans, so
Mhm.
like, the pregnancy is moving as it should, but I think it's really important, and I love the way you answered that question when I asked about, like, how you were feeling and the anxiety around that, because sometimes I think especially in faith spaces, the idea that is projected is, "Well, if you trust God, then it's fine."
Mm-mm.
It doesn't be believing what God said does not remove our humanity. We're
That's right,
literally still existing in this world and in our bodies.
that's
And
right.
you are dealing with, I used to say, I think I got this from like one of my professors in undergrad, but she would talk about how it was like literature. She would talk about how you bring yourself to the reading of every text. And she was specifically talking about books, but she said you can view every situation in life as a text. So
Mhm.
everything that you have experienced historically, you're still bringing it with you because it's part of you.
Exactly, my grief. Now, we know that grief is a cycle. My
Hmm.
grief was still there because this is 5 babies, and I knew the sex of every one, every miscarried baby, and my son. 3 boys and 1 girl. So I'm carrying the grief of those babies not being here with me, even to every appointment. When the biophysical profiles would come back okay, when the ultrasounds would come back okay. Every Wednesday was a standing appointment for my mother and me. From one
Hmm.
o'clock until 5 o'clock every Wednesday, I was at the hospital getting tests, again, making sure everything was okay. That grief and that small level of not being sure was still with me every time.
Hmm.
And let me just yes, it was with me even in the operating room as they were preparing me for the C-section.
Hmm.
It was not until I heard my son's cry. Well, first, before I
Hmm.
heard him cry, I heard the doctors and the nurses exclaim, "This is a big baby." But when I heard his cry,
Hmm.
that's all of that disappeared for that moment until the
Right.
next.
Right. Right. Incredible. Okay. So Jules makes it into the world. I can't imagine the joy, the love, the relief, everything that you feel in the family. Just, I can't imagine. And of course, your husband, you know,
Yeah,
the first baby who is here and is going to be with us is a boy.
listen, and he held him. Now I was still in the OR, but my mother said
Mhm.
that he held him at that time. He was in the nursery. He held him up and said, "This is going to be my drummer." And let me just tell you, our words have life because that
Uh-huh.
my son, ever since the age of, I believe it's 1, has had a full-size drum set and has been
Wow.
playing ever since.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It's so powerful. And to your point, the word of God does say that the power of death and life is in
Yes.
the tongue. And so that he spoke that, and Jules is a drummer. That's incredible. So, but wait, there's more. So after you had Jules, so talk about, just walk us through the journey to your next pregnancy and birth story.
Well, no, the years really going on, enjoying life and, uh, you know, just enjoy life. And, let's see, she was born in '07. In '06, um, I said to my husband, "I think I'm pregnant." And he said, "Well, how did that happen?" And I literally, this is literally now. I looked at him and I said, "You were there. I'm sure you know." So here we go again. Um,
Mhm.
Here we go again. Go to the store and get a pregnancy test, and sure enough, it's happened again. So we're grateful. We're grateful to the Lord. We're grateful to the Lord. And my mother said, "Lord, the Lord has done it again." Now, and then she said, now you don't want no more, do you?" I said, "Well, whatever happens, it happens." So once again, because of my issue, when I got pregnant, I didn't go to the regular OB, but I went to the specialist and they cared for me for
Mhm.
months. And once again, I have to go through the same routine. And here is grief. Now Jules is here, right? We've received the promise of God, but here that cycle of grief again. I know I have
Mhm.
one, but is this next one gonna come? So here's grief
Right.
every appointment, and I still have to go through the same routine as I did with Jules. And here is grief again until I hear that cry in the OR,
Mhm.
then it leaves again. So now, by this time, Jules just turned 2, and here I am with Bull Elizabeth. Yeah. Yes, sis. We were busy.
Sheesh. So now you have a 2-year-old and your daughter is a newborn. Mm, okay.
Uh-huh.
Just talk about parenting from that space.
Listen, with the responsibilities of being a wife, a worker in the church,
Mhm.
and at that time, I was also working outside of the home. And being a mother, it's like, okay, I said, where is this going to balance? Where is this going to balance? And eventually, I became a stay at home mom. And I always thought that that was one of the easiest jobs. Well, let me tell you, it is not. It is not. I was busier as a stay at home mom than I was as a working woman. But
100%.
yeah, but it was a joy. I felt like, okay, I'm made for this. Breastfeeding and making sure that they had the healthiest meals and making sure that the house was just right for them, making sure that I had the right doorknobs, French door handles, so that if they wanted to access any room, they could.
They
Later
could
on,
just pull. Okay.
yeah, later
Yeah.
on, I learned that maybe you shouldn't have done that, but hey, by that time, too late because the whole house had
Might
them.
be
But it was a joy, and the way my family, uh, my sister Carmen, my niece, and my nephews, and my cousins, my mother's sister's children, the way they rallied around them, it was like there was always a party for something at our house because these were the miracle babies and everybody was
mhm.
so happy and so overjoyed that they were finally here. But I enjoyed, I enjoyed every bit of motherhood.
Awesome. But wait,
There's more.
there's more. There's more.
2008,
So we've got Jules, we've got Jewel, and now, mhm,
2008. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was a first Sunday. We were riding home from the corner store. I don't know why this always takes place in a vehicle. And this time I didn't turn to my husband, but I'm looking straight ahead and I said, "I think I'm pregnant." And his words were, "Oh my God." I, why did you not? He didn't ask how it happened this time. He just said, "Oh my God." Now, now, mm, now, this is 2000. Let's see, she's born in '07. This was, let's see, yeah, she wasn't even 1 yet, okay?
Oh
She
my
was,
goodness.
yeah, 2008 'cause she's
My goodness.
oh, wait a minute, yeah, she was born in 2009, yeah. So, I go and get a pregnancy test and sure, yeah, he's like, "Oh my god, oh my god." He started sweating then. I said to my mother, she said in her southern drawl, "Oh Lord, have mercy. What we gonna do?" So, I've got Jules who is 2, Jewel who is not quite 1, not quite 1, and here I am
Mm,
again. And then here comes Julianne in 2009. And out of all of the pregnancies, I had the hardest time with her. And now looking back on things, I realized that it was an attack of the enemy because of the gift that God,
mm.
all of my children are gifted and talented. But that last one, she's in a category all by herself.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And again, you know, in the OR, until I hear that cry, grief
Mhm.
is there again.
Yeah. I think that's a really powerful point because um, I know that a lot of times we talk a lot about how negative emotions or negative words or negative feelings are oftentimes just pushed to the forefront instead of the positive ones. And this is one of those moments where you really can see that happening. Like you have had two successful pregnancies with healthy, thriving children. And in the third pregnancy that you have carried to term, that you know, you're
Yeah.
still like, all right now, because and I can only imagine that the loss of a child that you miscarriages are a particular kind of grief.
Yes.
And then giving birth and that child not surviving is a different grief.
Yes, it is. Yes.
So I can imagine it's making sense to me as we're talking through it, like, oh, okay. Because you did give birth.
Mhm.
And so you had the experience of losing that child after birth. So you needed that other thing that the other two children who survived that they did, and that was to hear the cry.
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Makes sense. That makes sense. And it's a really powerful, like you said earlier, it's a really powerful way to understand grief is that it stays and it like, you know, and I don't think I heard someone say once that grief is love with nowhere to go.
Huh. That's good.
And so it I don't I don't think I think it gets less difficult, like the days get less difficult, but I don't know that I mind that I still there are shadows of grief at times when like about certain people that I've lost.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah. I think that's really powerful. Like
I
grief is it
agree.
reminds us.
I agree. And it helps shape who we are and who we will become. Um, for so long, I thought or I heard that, when you hear crying or when you hear a person crying, that that just represents sorrow. But for me, it wasn't the cry that represented my sorrow, but it was the loss that represented my grief and my sorrow. And in the OR, it was the cry for me that represented joy.
Mm,
When I
mm,
heard that cry, it
yeah.
was all joy. That was when the grief
Yeah.
dissipated.
That's really powerful. Wow. So
Yeah.
we have Jules, we have Jewel, we have Julianne. Can you tell us the significance of your children's names?
Yes. Well, our first son, who was born in 2001, His name was Julian Devon. He had his father's middle name, and we wanted a nice name that represented how precious they were to us. And all of their names are a variation of the name Julian. So his name was
Okay.
spelled Julian. So that we have Jules. My husband said, I'm going to choose his name. And he said
Hmm.
Jules, which his name means precious. His middle name is Christian. That was chosen by my mother. So his name
Hmm.
means precious, follower of God. Then we
Hmm.
have Jewel, who, I mean, that's obvious. Jewel
Hmm.
means precious. Jewel Elizabeth. And I forgot what Elizabeth means, but it's also a family name. And then we have
Hmm.
Julienne, Juliene, the feminine of her brother's name. Her name means precious, and her middle name is Imani, faith, precious faith.
Wow. So you made it to the other side of this, or you made it to this spot on the journey. So, because I don't like to think of it as having ended. I think it's just a continuing journey, especially as a parent. It continues. So when you look back now, what does, and we talked a little bit about this in terms of like grief and recognizing that it stays with you and things like that. What does healing look like for you now? Do you feel like you have healed from experiencing the loss of your children? Or do you feel like it's ongoing?
I feel like I have healed. I feel like I've healed from the loss of them. Um, I don't, I don't mourn them, but
Mm,
I give God praise because he allowed me to give birth to them. And that's because I realized that they were all souls who were waiting. And this is what I believe. And this is
mhm,
what I know. They were all souls who were waiting for me to carry. And although they did not make it, they helped make me the mother I am now, the child of God that I am now. When I look at my children, who always call me extra, many times I cry because I'm like, at one time, you were just a thought in my mind, and then you became a promise, and now you are here. And I'm grateful that God has turned that grief into rejoicing. Yeah.
incredible. It was something else I wanted to ask you about.
Sure.
This was, I didn't ask you about this before, but it was when you talked about when you went into labor with your the first child that you delivered, that you did go and say, "Hey, something's wrong," and you were sent home.
Yes.
And then you went back the next day, and that baby did not survive after you gave birth. So there's a lot of conversation around Black women and maternal health. Was it a case of you just being dismissed in that moment? And then how did you process that later once your baby didn't make it? Did you have thoughts of like maybe this wouldn't have happened if you'd listened to me, things like that?
Yes, I was dismissed and I was angry. Not only was I angry, but as my husband was on the phone with the representatives from the infertility clinic, they were weighing the option of rushing me to the hospital where they were
Mm-hmm.
to take care of my medical needs. But at that point, it was too late. I
Mm-hmm.
was angry with the doctor because I said she didn't listen to me. If she had listened to me, she would have
Mm-hmm.
known that I was in labor.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that even she um, recognized her error because she didn't even show up the next
Mm-hmm.
day
Mm-hmm.
um, to deliver my son.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, I was dismissed, and unfortunately, in our community, that happens too often. I thought about taking legal action. I thought about so many, I mean, my mind was just all over the place. And it took God to settle my mind. I'm the type of girl who says behind every cloud, there's a silver lining. And even in this, I said, okay, God, I don't understand what it is right now, but eventually I will.
Mhm.
So yeah, that whole process, it helped shape me into who I am.
Yeah, I bet. Did it change your self-advocacy going forward? Like, were you more like, did you say more? Did you like, speak up more? Were you pressing more after that?
With concerning myself, I didn't have to be because the doctors, they already had that covered. However, with my youngest daughter who suffers from autoimmune disease, it made me more vocal when
Mhm,
it came to her care.
mhm,
I was that mama who was not going to take no for an answer. I refused to take no for an answer. And as a result, it caused the doctors before she was diagnosed, it caused the doctors to say, listen, maybe we better take a closer look at this.
mhm,
Had I not spoken up, they would not have tested her to realize that there's something else going on. What we
mhm,
thought it was, it is not, but it is
mhm.
actually something more serious. And
Wow.
I'm glad, and I will never, I tell my children, I said, listen, it took too much to get you here. I will always be your advocate.
Yeah.
I won't let anybody run over you. I won't let you run over anybody. And when it comes to my children, listen, that's a battle.
Mhm,
That's a battle I'll fight.
mhm. You can actually just put it. You can put a period right there when it comes, and that is not a correct sentence.
Yeah.
When it comes to my children,
Yep.
period, and that's
That
it. Yeah,
that's it.
and every mother understands. Every mother understands for sure. So thank you, because I wanted to go back to that, because advocacy specifically for Black women for our health is something that we have to do more work on. Like, we
Yes.
have to labor more to force people to listen to us, and that is, something that there are a lot of organizations and activists trying to change, but there is a lot of bias within the U.S. healthcare system, and so
Yes.
it's very common. But to know that your experience actually made you um, an even more staunch advocate for your daughter, for your children in general, like all of them, but specifically for your daughter, knowing that, okay, this is the one thing that I'm really grateful for my son's pediatrician, because obviously I'd never had a pregnancy. I'd never had a kid. My husband had never had a kid. We had no idea what we were doing. And when he was born, he was sick.
Mhm.
And they didn't know. They still don't know. They still have no idea. But uh, his pediatrician was awesome because she taught me. He was born during COVID, so we couldn't do a whole bunch of like.
Yeah.
It just wasn't wise to constantly be in the hospital. Believe it or not, like, that actually was not the safest place, because everybody's sick.
Right.
So for a child who is sickly, she was like, it's really not ideal unless it really is an emergency. So she taught me. She taught us how to manage his care and trust our own instincts.
Hmm.
So she didn't position herself as like the one who has all the knowledge, but she was like, you're an expert on him. I'm an expert on medicine,
Right.
but you are the expert on him. You know what he's doing at 3 o'clock in the morning. You know what he used. You know how his bowel movements are supposed to look. You know like, all of that stuff. So she's like, you have to trust that.
Yeah.
And so I'm really thankful for that, because so many times there's this hubris that exists among medical professionals, specifically when it comes to women and Black women, that,
Yeah.
like, you're being dramatic, then we don't get our needs met, and sometimes the consequences
Yeah.
can be fatal. So that experience, though it did led to potentially played a role in your first son, Julian, not making it, it also helps you to advocate for Julianne, so that, hey,
Absolutely.
you're not going to tell us what's not wrong. I'm telling you, take a look.
Absolutely.
What advice would you give a woman going through, and you know what, the family, because I don't want to miss the fact that dad is experiencing this too. He's going through it as well.
Yes.
So what advice would you give people who are going through an infertility experience now in terms of how to care for themselves as they manage it?
Oh, first, I would say give yourself grace. Many times as women, because most women are, we have a nurturing and a caring spirit. We always have grace that we can extend to others. Yet when it comes to ourselves, we are so hard on ourselves. It's my fault. What am I not doing right? I'm less than a woman. These are all things that played over and over in my head. But give yourself grace. And to men, I will say to extend grace to yourself as well, because you could be so focused on taking care of the needs of your wife or your partner that you forget all about yourself. To families, I will say be patient with those who are going through the struggle. And for the sake of Almighty God, never ask a married woman, when are you going to have a baby or more babies? Because you do not know the struggle. I'm a pretty strong woman, but I cannot tell you how many times I walked away, and when I turned my back, I was in tears because I was asked that question. Like, you don't know. And if you can't discern that something is wrong, I'm certainly not going to tell you my struggles. So, so,
Right,
uh,
right.
so back to your question. Be patient and please be mindful of the conversations you keep.
Thank you, because you literally answered the question that I wanted to that one, and the one I wanted to ask you about that, just to kind of, what was that like? For sure, people were asking, saying, speculating, right? So thank you for that. And I think, thankfully, I think social media helps to get different perspectives in front of people
Yeah,
because, oh, it's normal. You
yeah.
got married when you having that baby, and it's like,
It's not
please don't do that. Please don't do that. Just care for people you're in community with enough to not ask that question. You don't have a clue. You
exactly.
don't have a clue. So thank you for that. And then we'll end with, what do you think about the woman you are now versus the woman you were before any pregnancies? Like that, the little girl who had her idea in kindergarten about wanting to be a mom, um, who became a woman who's married, and the idea of motherhood and that it would happen and it will be fine and it will be, and this is how I live my life, to the woman that has gone through all that you've experienced and now as a parent of three beautiful, successful, thriving children.
Yeah, thank you. Well, to that little girl, I call her little girl me. I would say that the older version of you is living out her dream. And I believe that if I had not gone through any of those things, and that's just a drop in the bucket, I would not be the compassionate woman that I am now, because I'm now able to realize that every experience a person goes through can change who they are for either good, bad. And having been one who's gone through so much, when I talk to people, when I lend an ear, I won't say counseling and even sometimes counseling, but when I lend an ear I'm able to see beyond their words and hear what they're not saying and hear what they're really saying. And if I had not gone through any of that, I don't believe that I would be the person full of compassion that I am right
Mhm.
now. So it helped shape everything I went through was for a purpose.
Yeah, perfect. We did it.
All right, we did it.
We did it.
Go
We
with
did it.
another level. Congratulations to you. And this is, listen, this is ministry. Ministry is not just within the four walls of the church. Ministry extends beyond the church. We are the hands and feet of Jesus. And to those, the thousands you will reach, it is ministry, your ministry. And I pray that great things are in store for you. God don't do nothing, and this is my good country English. God don't do nothing by coincidence.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
That's it. That's the episode. What did you think? Please rate, comment, review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast. If you engage in that way, it will get the podcast in front of more people. It'll appear in more people's algorithm. So please engage. Let us know what you think, and please reach out if you have anybody that you think has a story of resilience, and any woman, and you think their story should be told in this format. Please reach out. Best way to reach out is on Instagram at Unbreakable Her Podcast. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time. Stay unbreakable.